Our fear of them is irrational. We dread the thought of being eaten alive. Yet, there are only a handful of attacks worldwide each year. Now, we investigate the truth behind shark attacks, separating fact from fiction, exploring and not exploiting. These are the stories from the Shark Attack Files.
Being attacked by a shark is probably a surfer's worst nightmare.
I just see this huge circle of teeth coming right at me.
I lifted up my leg and had one look at it, and there was just a lot of flesh hanging off.
Crying out to God just to save us, because we knew that this thing was coming to finish us off.
And I saw a huge trail of blood.
Could have made a meal out of them. I'm just grateful it happened to me and it didn't happen to the kids.
Sharks don't regard human beings as natural prey items, so they're not swimming around looking for humans.
It was almost as if I was in a movie, Jaws. That was what was going through my mind. That was the feeling of the shark actually hitting me.
For South African surfer Stephen Cross, it was a nightmare come true. His friend Carl was only a few feet away when a giant white shark tore Stephen from his board, ripping into his wetsuit-covered arm.
That's definitely just
Only 3 days after the attack, the surfers recall the terror of nearly being eaten alive.
And I just remember seeing these two black eyes and this pointed nose, and it was just chomping wildly, just randomly.
And I saw a huge trail of blood. I really thought he was going to die. I actually had no doubt in my mind that is the end of Stephen. And in a way I thought, well, this is going to be me next. I was hopeless and useless in the situation because it was so big, so powerful. Just a tail got me and it flung me off my board like I was like a piece of paper blowing in the wind.
And I was just pounding the head as much as I could. Eventually it submerged, and that's when I started panicking because I couldn't see it anymore. And Carl helped me on my board, and we just headed for the beach.
Experts speculate white shark attacks on humans are normally cases of mistaken identity, ending quickly when the shark realizes it has not bitten its usual prey of seals or sea lions. But in this bizarre encounter, the white shark continued the attack, chasing the surfers out of the water.
We just paddled, and eventually we turned around and we saw the shark following us. And it was just opening and closing its mouth and right behind our feet. And I just thought, okay, this is where I die. And I was just screaming at the top of my voice, Jesus, save me, just get me out of here. And I screamed it so much I had blood in my throat.
Stephen felt the shark chomping viciously just inches behind his feet. The shark would make a final desperate lunge and miss the surfer, instead slicing cleanly through his surfboard leash.
This is when it was chasing me, and that's how close it came. When I felt that tug, and I asked Carl if he had bumped me, I didn't know it was this, but this is obviously what happened when I felt that tug. It was coming after my feet.
Weak from blood loss, Stephen collapsed on the beach, relying on Carl to save his life.
It's quite an ordeal. We got to the beach, and that's when Carl just took over. He was a medic in the army, and he knew what to do, and just took over from there. If Carl wasn't there, I wouldn't have made it.
3 days after the attack, there are still many unanswered questions. Was it luck or a miracle that saved Stephen and Carl? And are they willing to tempt fate again?
I've got scars, I've got a sore arm, that'll heal, but it'll take a while for the memory of it to go away.
I always ask why the shark attacked Stephen and not me. Was I just lucky that it didn't attack me? At the moment I've got no passion at all to go back into the water.
I think I'll be out there again. I could feel the itch. I could feel the the desire to be out there. It's just too perfect to leave it alone.
With a long history of gruesome shark attacks, South African shark experts face the often daunting task of attempting to identify the culprits, hoping the location of the attack will provide the first clue.
In many cases, it's difficult to determine what shark species are responsible. We have a pretty good idea that they are mostly white sharks, particularly in the cooler waters of the Cape. And then as one moves into warmer water, we find a high incidence of attacks by tiger sharks and probably the Zambezi shark. But it's often difficult to distinguish the different species.
Many of South Africa's beaches have been successfully protected by shark nets, but in remote, unnetted areas of the Southern Cape, daring surfers risk attack each time they enter the water. Mossel Bay was the scene of the first recorded white shark attack on a surfer in South African waters. As a young university student, Gideon Skeltema made history that day, a day etched deeply into his psyche, like the tooth marks on his shattered surfboard.
This was in 1971, and as far as could be established, I was the first surfer in South Africa to be taken by a great white shark.
As he floated on his board, Gideon saw a rapidly approaching shadow just under the surface. There was no doubt it was a shark.
Through panic, I immediately pulled my legs onto the board and started to paddle frantically towards the closest rocks. Within seconds, the shark reached me. This thing dragged me under the water, I don't know how far or how deep, and it was obviously holding the board and leg like a sandwich.
Moments before the attack, a lighthouse keeper perched high above was first to see the approaching great white. But the lighthouse keeper was too far away to help Gideon. Instead, he telephoned the local hospital and warned them to stand by. There was about to be a shark attack.
The lighthouse keeper had a clear view of the shark from his position, and according to his account, this shark swam straight for where I was sitting on my surfboard. Unfortunately, we did not hear the alarm being raised. He ran back into his tower and had the good sense at that point in time to contact the hospital. So the hospital was informed that a shark attack was about to take place before I had seen the fin.
Anticipating the impending attack, doctors were able to save Gideon's leg and life, and today he is fully recovered.
The power exerted was immense, and it is something that I will never forget as long as I live. The whole sensation of being inside the jaws of a great white is a most terrifying experience, I can assure you that. And I'm just very fortunate to be talking to you today.
I don't have the central teeth. The problem is here.
Like human fingerprints, sharks leave behind unmistakable clues to their identity in the form of bite marks. By examining a victim's wound, wetsuit, or board, experts are sometimes able to identify the species responsible by comparing data acquired during shark autopsies.
Looking at bite patterns on surfboards, usually you get some nice tooth impressions in surfboards. Try and get an idea of what species of shark is responsible, and then also the size of the shark, because obviously the bigger the shark, the greater the distance between the teeth.
I did an analysis of shark attacks in South African waters from 1960 through to 1990, and I found that on average there are about 3 attacks per year. There are very few shark attack records where the shark has repeatedly mauled the victim. In most cases it seems to be one bite. There may be a bit of shaking involved, or otherwise it's very much a quick, almost momentary bite. and then the shark moves away.
Jeremy's findings have been a reprieve for some sharks, like the gruesome-looking but harmless ragged tooth, a species mistakenly blamed for numerous attacks.
The ragged-toothed shark looks very ferocious because he's got these spike-like teeth which stick out of the mouth, hence the name ragged-toothed shark. He uses those teeth to spike the fish that he's chasing after. The teeth have no cutting ability whatsoever. But despite the seemingly ferocious appearance of the raggy, it's in fact a very, very docile shark.
Unfortunately for the ragged tooth, its close proximity to swimming beaches makes it a natural scapegoat for attacks and a target for slaughter by vengeful humans.
I think one must remember that sharks, be they bull sharks, tiger sharks, great whites, don't regard human beings as natural prey items. So they're not swimming around looking for humans.
Though sharks do not intentionally seek human prey, people may emit sounds, smells, and visual cues that stimulate a shark's curiosity. Lacking hands, the shark may choose to investigate people by first bumping them and then biting.
For sharks, biting is not necessarily associated with feeding. And I think many attacks on humans are not feeding attacks. It's just unfortunate that we have such thin skin that what may well start out as being an investigatory bite results or could result in a fairly nasty injury.
Sharks are known to patrol the murky water at river mouths, seeking carrion and waste that has floated downstream. It is a particularly dangerous place to enter the water, yet warnings often go unheeded.
Living in South Africa, where we have a fairly high shark presence, there's always the constant warnings about sharks, especially when the rivers are coming down in floods. It often brings down the odd chicken and debris, which tend to attract the sharks to river mouths. So yeah, we're all very aware of it, which was, I think, quite a help when I got bitten, because we didn't panic. We were calm, we accepted the situation we were in, and we managed to deal with it.
Bruce Eldridge knew river mouths were notorious shark hangouts. He knew in murky brown water a shark could easily mistake him for prey, and he knew sharks aggressively feed in evening hours. Yet he ignored those factors and entered the water anyway, and it nearly cost him his leg.
It was getting quite late in the evening, and we were beginning to think about going in, but the waves were quite big and we were enjoying ourselves. But it definitely was playing on our mind that it was ideal conditions for shark attack. When the shark bit, there was no immediate response, just something's hit my leg, not to be too concerned. And only when it started thrashing in the water, pulling me down, shaking my leg, turning me around, was when I began to get really scared and realized that this was a shark that was actually biting my leg. And then it was just a case of sheer terror and hanging onto the board. The one thought that went through my mind was I mustn't let go of my surfboard, because that was giving me flotation and the shark was trying to pull me under the water. I lifted up my leg and had one look at it, and there was just a lot of flesh hanging off. And from then I didn't look at my leg again.
Rushed to the hospital, Bruce and the fate of his leg were now in the hands of the surgeons.
I was in the hospital for a month. It took them 3 days to decide whether to amputate my leg or not. On the third day they decided to try and save it, which they did a sterling job of. And from there it was just a case of letting the skin grafts come together and heal. Once the skin grafts were together, then it was to get back walking and surfing again. And riding a bicycle and getting back in the water were the best things to help me on the road to recovery.
Today, Bruce continues to surf, but avoids river mouths, murky brown water, and late evening surfing, vowing to never again ignore the warning signs of attack.
It is their ocean, and we shouldn't try and eradicate them or anything like that just so that we can feel safe when we go into the sea. When people go in the sea, it's the same as going into a nature reserve where there are lions. You know the risks and you play according to the rules.
Northern California, like South Africa and Australia, is a prolific great white shark habitat. Humans also recreate heavily in these areas, yet the incidence of attack is still very rare. Experts believe, though great whites and humans are often in close proximity, the sharks are actually seeking something else. Studies show that only fat, calorie-rich seals and sea lions may provide the necessary energy a great white needs to satisfy its rapid metabolism. These northern elephant seals, especially the newly weaned pups, are most vulnerable to attack. But interestingly, like humans, they often survive encounters with white sharks.
The intriguing thing about white shark attacks, we believe, is that they're actually not good. Their success rate is low.
This leads marine biologists to speculate that white sharks are not as tenacious a predator as commonly believed, employing more of a hit-and-miss technique that is often unsuccessful.
Most humans, and probably most of their prey in general, survive the initial attack. If you go and look at adult pinnipeds, the adult marine mammals on the coast of California, a lot of them have scar marks from where they've been attacked and have survived. But the reality is there's so much to eat out there, and maybe you only have to eat every couple weeks, that there's always something another 100 yards away. So they'll just keep working at it until they succeed.
Evolution has developed the shark's keen senses, but not its brain. Though they are excellent at finding potential prey, they lack the reasoning ability to distinguish a seal from a surfboard.
White sharks attack humans because they look like something good to eat. They're reminiscent of their normal prey, which is sea lions and harbor seals and elephant seals. And you're about the same size as an elephant seal, and same shape. If you have a wetsuit on, you're about the same color as an elephant seal. So it's almost certainly the case that you look like an hors d'oeuvre, basically.
Seals and humans aren't the only victims of the white shark's indiscriminate biting practices. California's sea otters are also bitten, severely injured, and left for dead by the predators. Some of the luckier wounded otters found washed up on the beach end up here at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Julie Heimer runs the Sea Otter Research and Conservation Program, which has rescued and rehabilitated hundreds of injured otters since its inception over a decade ago.
Sea otters may fall victim of a great white shark just due to the nature of where the animal lives. They spend the majority of their time on the surface of the water. They lay on their backs, they eat in that position, they rest, they groom. To a great white shark, that looks like, prey, dinner. There's no evidence to say whether they like sea otters or not. They may be confused in what the animal really is. If you look at the teeth construction of the white shark, the way they tear into the flesh of animals, the otters that we've received do indicate that it was a white shark. But I think those are some of the areas that we're learning about, why some of these injured animals are washing up and what caused this injury.
Many of the infirm otters are just pups and need even more specialized care. At the open ocean pool, wetsuit-clad divers become the animals' surrogate mothers, teaching them to eat, groom, and socialize.
The critical aspect of the rehabilitation is the open ocean training, in which the surrogate moms take the animals out to the tide pool and the ocean right off the aquarium, and we actually mimic their natural moms in the behaviors that they need to take care of themselves.
Once released, recovered sea otters learn the hardships of life in the realm of the great white shark, and many will not survive. Those that are found dead may help the sea otter population as a whole by providing scientists with valuable data used to protect these endangered creatures. From her laboratory at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, Karen Sebra has conducted dozens of autopsies of sea otters found washed ashore. The results show 20% of the otters died from shark attack.
It's important to determine the cause of death in the sea otter populations in order for us to preserve the populations. So the goal of doing such a thorough job in determining cause of death is to try to learn what's killing the populations, what the mortality is out there, and then address those problems. And this is where sometimes we will find evidence of shark bite. We have found teeth embedded in the skull area back here in a specimen. In the case of a shark bite, you'll find tooth marks, and they often follow very particular patterns. This is the pelt of an adult sea otter, and a nice arc, little holes in an arc shape. This is the arc of a shark bite. These little holes are individual teeth. And we also might find evidence on the skeletal elements. In the case of a shark bite, you would find shavings of bone, sometimes piercings of bone, cracked bone. There's a very tiny shark tooth embedded in the skull, and if you look very, very closely, you'd be able to see that there's bone growth. So it could very well be that this animal survived the attack, since there is some signs of healing.
Living with an embedded tooth, the otter's skull reveals it survived after being bitten, only to die later from disease. The question that still intrigues scientists is whether or not white sharks actually consume sea otters, or simply bite and release them, as they often do in human attacks.
Two shark teeth, one fragmentary. We're finding sea otters on the beach with shark attack evidence, but those same sea otters that show evidence of having been bitten by sharks do not show evidence of having been really consumed by the sharks.
Meanwhile, the white shark faces its own struggle for survival, a battle it may have lost without intervention from humans. Until the early 1990s, white sharks were at the mercy of sports fishermen, indiscriminate commercial fishing nets, and even a misguided few who killed white sharks on sight to rid the ocean of its most notorious predator. As white shark sightings grew increasingly scarce worldwide, government-protected seal populations rose rapidly, threatening to upset the delicate balance of the ocean. As a result, South Africa, the United States, and Australia have all passed legislation to protect the white shark. Other species, however, remain unprotected and unable to rebound from fishing pressure.
Virtually all of the common sharks in the world, almost without exception, are the subjects of fisheries. And what's happened for every major shark fishery in the world in history has been that the fishery takes off, people catch a lot of them, and then it crumps. Almost unanimously, it crumps. You can't fish these fish heavily. They just don't have the biology to allow that.
Unlike many species of schooling fish, which lay thousands of eggs and multiply rapidly, sharks are slow to reproduce. Sharks are also late bloomers, perhaps not becoming sexually mature until they are in their teens. Some species may not even reproduce every year, and in many cases, sharks have relatively small litters of pups. Shark fin soup a high-priced Asian delicacy, has perpetuated shark slaughter around the world and encouraged the barbaric and sometimes illegal act of finning. Caught on film in a protected marine sanctuary, these modern-day pirates brazenly leave hundreds of pairs of illegally caught shark fins to dry on lines. Fearing prosecution, they move on upon spotting cameras, but will no doubt return as long as the sharks hold out. Unchecked and unregulated, fishing operations in international waters continue to decimate shark populations. To what degree, we may never know. Shark attacks are usually headline-making news, but often stories focus on the sensational and not the factual. This type of overdramatic coverage has perpetuated the shark as a mindless killer and made celebrities of shark attack victims. Hoping to avoid the hype, German-born engineer Marco Flagg was reluctant to speak about his shark encounter. In reality, his story is one of incredible good fortune, thanks to a piece of life-saving diving equipment he designed and built.
I look to my left, and there from below, out of the murk, I just see this huge circle of teeth coming right at me, speeding at me almost like a missile. The next thing I knew, it was clamping around me. It had me in its jaws.
Feeling intense pressure, Flagg waited to be sliced in half, but was instead released. Fighting panic, he scrambled to his inflatable boat, knowing the shark was circling nearby.
So I tried to get into the inflatable, and usually I can do that with all my gear on, but I tried a couple of times to lift myself out of the water and I couldn't do it. So I dropped my weight belt, I took off my gear, and I got into the boat. Now my scuba gear was slowly drifting away, so I grabbed it and I fell back into the water. I thought, this may have been my last dumb mistake. Left arm of
but the shark disappeared, and to Flagg's complete shock, he was virtually unharmed except for some small puncture wounds. Flagg later realized a dive navigational device of his own creation shielded him from the shark's bite.
When the shark came, it clamped around me and it hit the front of this instrument. And you can see here and here the impact of the shark teeth. It's torn up here. It was this instrument on my stomach and the scuba tank on my back that effectively served as armor during the attack and prevented me from much more severe injury.
Though the white shark had several opportunities to return and finish the attack, it appeared to be repelled by the taste of metal it received in the initial bite. It left Flagg needing only a few stitches to close the wounds, for which he was treated and quickly released. Dr. Tak Hattori was one of Flagg's attending physicians.
He was a very lucky man. If the air tanks and his electronic equipment hadn't gotten in the way and prevented the shark from closing his jaw, the jaw that was inflicted the wounds in his groin area would have disemboweled him.
Less lucky was one of Hattori's earlier cases, a young surfer killed off Monterey in 1981. In a single bite, a shark estimated at over 18 feet in length bit through surfer and board, leaving the victim no chance for survival.
If you get a big enough shark that'll take out the whole side of your body, then you don't have a chance. It's not blood loss, it's loss of organs and everything else.
The cases of the young surfer, brutally bitten, and Marco Flagg, tasted and released, clearly illustrate the white shark's varying modes of attack. Though the great white easily has the size and power to dismember and kill a human, it rarely does. Of the 42 recorded white shark attacks on humans worldwide from 1980 to 1990, only 10 were fatal. Survivors like Marco Flagg prove there is escape from the ocean's ultimate predator. With more and more humans taking to the ocean for recreation, the odds of shark attack naturally increase. But when a windsurfer was struck in 1995, it came as a shock to many of the sport's enthusiasts. 25-year-old Mike Sullivan thought he was immune from attack. And though they often rode at Davenport, scene of a highly publicized 1992 attack on a surfer, Mike and his friend Matt Hout never even entertained the thought of a shark pursuing them as they glided over waves at high speed. But as they would discover on August 6, 1995, the great white is often an unpredictable predator.
I didn't feel vulnerable because you're above the water, you're moving, you have power. You think that the shark would just let it be. But I was hit, probably going close to 10 miles an hour.
He got hit by something behind him, and I thought, oh, he's having a really bad wipeout, because the splashes were like, 20, 30 feet in the air. Just huge splashes, looked like a giant explosion out in the water.
Knocked in the water and floating helplessly, Mike watched in terror as the great white continued the assault on his board.
It lifted the tail of my board up out of the water, and that knocked me off balance. Once I was off balance, I jumped off the back of the board and swam away as fast as I could. That's when I saw Matt.
And he seemed fine to me. He was just treading water. Just, his eyes were just like big. He had death. He thought he was going to die.
I was panicking. A shark had my board and it was swimming around with it.
When the shark suddenly departed, Mike was forced to make an unenviable decision. Make a long swim back to the beach or return to his damaged board.
I considered my options really quick in my head, and I thought, well, I can swim back in a quarter mile. That'd take quite a long time. And I thought maybe the shark would just bite my board, leave, and come back for me later. This is my chance to hop on it and get back in.
Mike survived the attack without injury, and in the confusion never actually saw the shark. It was only later, after examining his wounded sailboard, that he was able to piece together what took place.
One theory is that the shark came in and rested the top of its mouth, the front V of its mouth, on this part of the board, scraped down, maybe got a tooth stuck in this area, thrashed to free itself and plucked some foam out here. There's also some marks on the opposite side of the board that weren't there before. This one and this one. There were some scrapes in the fin, which is missing now, and there's this scrape, which was caused from the attack also.
Though this attack is very unusual, white sharks must often chase down their normal prey while reaching speeds in excess of 25 miles per hour. A frightening fact windsurfers must now consider each time they enter the water in a white shark habitat.
As a windsurfer, we've never heard of a windsurfer being attacked, so as windsurfers, we thought we were safe. We didn't look like seals. We had all this equipment. We were moving way too fast. It wasn't going to happen, so we put it out of our mind.
Though sensational attacks grab most of the headlines, shark research is proving to be of great value to people. New discoveries may even help discard the myth of sharks as notorious killers, promoting their great value to humankind. Recent experiments conducted at the University of Hawaii show for the first time that sharks suntan. The fact that sharks tan, yet do not get cancer, is exciting news for cancer researchers, and was an amazing discovery for PhD candidates Chris and Gwen Lowe.
We came about this pretty much by accident. My wife and colleague Gwen was helping me collect sharks. But when we collected new sharks from the bay and we put them in with sharks that had been in this shallow seawater pond for a month, we noticed that there was a tremendous difference in their color. And it was at that point Gwen kind of said, you know what, I think these sharks are suntanning. The only animals that we could find that have been shown to suntan are humans and a few other mammals. So this is really a unique finding in that it's probably the first aquatic animal that's been documented to suntan.
Capturing the sharks for observation is not easy. These baby scalloped hammerheads are not dangerous, but very skittish.
What we originally wanted to do was demonstrate that these sharks truly were suntanning and not just changing color to blend into their background like a lot of other fishes and sharks can.
And the way we did this was we got UV blocking filters and placed them on the fins of the sharks. So on one fin we had a UV blocking filter, and on the other fin we had a clear filter as a control. And we let them swim around in the pond for about a week, and we took them out, collected the sharks, pulled the filters off, and saw actual tan lines around the UV blocking filter.
No shark has yet been found with a melanoma. And hopefully some of the research that we've planned for the future will help us determine if there's a link between the sun tanning ability and their ability not to get melanomas. So whether this tanning gives them the ability to prevent skin cancer development, or whether they have some other physiological mechanism that they can use to repair DNA damage caused by ultraviolet radiation, we have yet to find out. Basically, this shark is just collected from the pond or the bay floor yesterday, and it's a lot lighter in color. And this one's been in this pond now for about 4 or 5 months. So it's been exposed to these high light levels now for a number of months. The small shark, however, has been living in the murky parts of the bay where very little light penetrates. This research might have application to humans. If this suntanning does afford the shark some protection, what degree of protection does it afford?
This one's actually a lot darker from when it was first caught.
Yeah, yesterday it was a lot lighter. Sharks have been around for 300 million years. If they possess this ability to suntan and appear not to get melanomas, is there some evolutionary change between sharks and mammals that might give us some indication of why melanomas develop in humans?
Related to diet. You can see how tan that one is, even on the bottom, on the belly.
A lot of people are very excited and interested in this research, but our biggest fear is that people will misinterpret it and will start to again think, oh well, sharks don't get skin cancer, therefore if I eat them or I rub their skin on me, I won't get skin cancer either. We have no information to show that this is true. I think this is another case of, again, sharks showing their usefulness to humans, and not just from, here's another animal that we can exploit, but here's another animal that we can learn from.
Generally, sharks are thought to be cancer-resistant due to their skeleton, which is all cartilage rather than bone found in mammals. These cartilage skeletons are thought to perhaps inhibit tumor growth, and numerous experiments have been conducted with shark cartilage for treating cancerous tumors in humans. Although the results are still inconclusive, shark cartilage has become a fad cure that has proved a killer for sharks, who have died by the thousand in the making of unproved over-the-counter shark cartilage remedies.
Some researchers did some shark cartilage experiments, and then all of a sudden everybody thinks that it's going to cure cancer or whatever. And you find that with a lot of different things. And I think that's just the human tendency to want a quick cure for something, or to believe in something that's not fully tested yet.
Like anything else, if there's a market for it.
Working with hammerheads has given Chris and Gwen a better understanding of shark behavior and allowed them to study the predators up close and personal without fear.
The hammerhead sharks are great. They're very gentle. They do have sharp teeth, but their mouths are so small that it's really hard for them to bite you unless you stick your hand in their mouth, like I've done on accident a few times.
Watch my ankles for me, I can't.
The hammerheads at the University of Hawaii are so gentle that Chris is able to hand feed the animals without fear of being bitten. This not-so-dangerous practice is a daily ritual for Chris, who is working to find out how fast the sharks grow.
again so they scrape their bellies on the sand now. From a growth perspective, the impression that we have of most sharks is that they're very slow growing, but most of their most rapid growth is when they're small. And from what we've seen with these three larger hammerheads that we have here is that these sharks have the capacity to grow really quickly if there's a lot of food available. So these are probably the best fed hammerheads in all of Hawaii.
While the docile hammerheads may reach up to 15 feet in length, they are not a threat to local surfers. What island wave riders genuinely fear is the aggressive tiger shark, a known man-eater that has wreaked havoc in paradise. Hawaii is still recovering from a rash of at least 10 tiger shark attacks that sparked controversy and fear among island residents in the early 1990s. And although the headline-making attacks have subsided for now, a local reporter's quest to investigate the attacks continues. Writing for Honolulu's Star Bulletin as their ocean reporter, Greg Ambrose has gone beyond the headlines to document the real stories behind the attacks.
It's a rare event when a human's attacked by a shark. I want to do a story that fleshed out these people, that told who they were, and to show that it's what happens next that's important. You know, did the shark attack steal something precious from these people, which was their love of the ocean?
The result was Shark Bites, a collection of compelling and sometimes bizarre encounters between humans and sharks.
Some of the attacks just are mind-boggling in their randomness and the time of day that it occurred, the time of year, where it happened. So it's just pure hell blind-ass bad luck when you're attacked by a shark, usually.
No one understands bad luck more than Robert Rogowitz. An avid swimmer and diver, Robert began a long vacation in Maui by stepping off the plane and into the jaws of a tiger shark.
His is something that everybody can relate to. It's a place that's seemingly safe, a place that he's come to for years and years and years, he and his wife Shirley, for their vacation. And here he is 20 minutes into his 16-day Hawaiian holiday, and he gets whacked.
We flew into Hawaii, and the first day I jumped in the water and I was swimming for about 20 minutes, and as I was swimming I felt something on my foot. And I stopped and turned around and looked, and sitting right behind me, maybe 3 feet away, was a 10-foot tiger shark. And it had already slit the top of my foot wide open.
Robert did not wait for the tiger's second assault. With all of his strength, he retaliated by kicking and punching his toothy aggressor.
All I remember is my mind trying to take in the size of this animal. It was so big, sitting right behind me. It was like beating against a brick wall. It was that massive.
Perhaps startled by the stubbornness of its potential meal, the shark disappeared into the deep as mysteriously as it had arrived.
One of the things I found out as I interviewed people and read case histories and accounts was that in the majority of the cases, the sharks weren't feeding. They were exploring something, and when you think about it, if you lacked hands and opposable thumbs and other ways of exploring your world, wouldn't you use your mouth to find out if something was edible or not?
Kauai, Hawaii's Garden Isle, was next to feel the impact of the tiger shark. Once again, the tiger's target was surfers, and when several unexpected attacks descended on the close-knit community of Hanalei, concerned locals began to wonder why the ever-present sharks had suddenly turned aggressive. It was 9 a.m., November 13, 1994, and as usual, sets of inviting waves were forming at the murky mouth of the Hanalei River. For Kathleen Lunn and her 2 children, the swells were too perfect to pass up. Moments after the family entered the water for a surf contest, Kathleen found herself bumped from below by a large tiger shark. Instinctively, she used the board as a fiberglass shield, deflecting the shark's glancing blow.
When I felt my board lifting up,
I swung my leg away from it like that. So I swung my leg up and away. So the surfer who's seen me do it, the bodyboarder, seen my leg just go flying. And that's when I like swung off my board and pushed my board towards it. And I was holding on, I was in the water, I was holding on to my board, thinking he was gonna come back and I was gonna have to like stick it down his throat or something.
As the shark submerged, Kathleen's thoughts immediately turned to her children, and she wasted no time in getting them out of the water.
I was just really grateful it wasn't them.
I kind of gathered all the
Mothers, whether they be animal mothers or human mothers, you just don't cross them. You don't threaten their offspring because they'll do incredible things, and that's what Kathleen Lund did. She was out surfing on a day with her children and other friends' children in the Honolulu Surf Club. And when that shark hit her, she was immediately frightened, as anyone would be, but then her maternal instinct kicked in. She whacked the shark with her surfboard because she wanted to protect her kids who were nearby and potentially the next victims of the shark.
Could have made a meal out of them, so I'm just grateful it happened to me and it didn't happen to the kids.
For some survivors, the emotional scars of a shark attack run deep, while others go on to find a new appreciation of the ocean, despite its inherent dangers.
Being attacked by a shark is probably a surfer's worst nightmare, whether they care to admit it or not. And I think every surfer, in reality, feels this. Sometime or another, they have fears about being attacked by a shark.
Greg Filzer would experience his worst nightmare October 15th, 1990. Yet he downplayed the incident from the beginning, fearing it would frighten his ocean-loving family.
His story appeared as a 2-paragraph little blurb in the Star Bulletin and Advertiser in Hawaii when the attack occurred. Scant details, nothing about it. Kauai surfer attacked by shark, bites board, that's it. And I wondered, there's got to be more to this.
The true story was one of courage, family, and near tragedy, beginning as Greg and his brother-in-law paddled out to go surfing.
I got a real strong bump on the tail of my board. Like if you're sitting at a stop sign and a car accidentally bumps you from behind. It was very deliberate. That's when I looked over at him, and that's when I was totally in awe of the size of him, the girth. He was just incredibly large. It was like having a VW van in the water next to you. And it was really slow and deliberate. And every time he took a lunge and grabbed a hold of my board, it was like being towed around by a car. The strength and the power, you can't imagine how strong they are. He hit me right at the fin, and I had a 9-inch fin on my longboard, and he couldn't get his mouth around the fin to get a bigger bite. As he was doing this, he was taking me down in a big circle, and I was actually going under. You can see right here, this is the fin box, and he was trying to get a bigger bite because I could feel
outmatched by the tiger shark. Greg refused to relinquish his board, hoping he could hold on until his brother-in-law could reach
he couldn't
him.
get his mouth over that fin. It was a 9-inch fin. Big, long. I knew that I didn't want to be separated from my board in the water, so I made a conscious decision that I was going to hold on to my board. And I climbed up to the tip of my board, and I was looking at my brother-in-law, and he was just paddling up on me the whole time. And that's when everything kind of stopped. I was just going down, and everything stopped, and I started to come back up out of the water and resurface.
Free from the shark's grasp, Greg downplayed his own valor, crediting his brother-in-law with true courage during the attack.
When you read about encounters with sharks, generally people just, they flee the water. They just clear the water immediately. Well, he didn't do that. He paddled up to me. He just kept paddling. And I was looking in his eyes, and the determination in his eyes was such that I knew that if he had to, he'd have gotten on and rode it around with me in order to help me out.
Delivered from the jaws of a tiger shark, Greg felt his life was inalterably changed for the better. He would reaffirm what was important in his life, cementing the bond between himself, his family, and their mutual love of the ocean.
No, it wasn't too good, huh?
He realized that beyond the effect on him, he didn't want to have the shark affect his children adversely because they're all water people.
It was important to me that they didn't lose touch with the ocean and become really afraid of the ocean. So I made a real point of setting them down and talking to them about what happened and explaining to them what happened, showing them the board, and letting them understand that it wasn't something that was directed to me specifically, and it wasn't something that was likely to happen to them. To be afraid to go in the ocean because of sharks, that's really a tragedy. That's really sad, because that's just another experience of the ocean. That's just another thing that's out there that makes it even more exciting.
Though very few of us will see them in their natural environment, sharks probably sense our presence more often than we would like to know. And although we would undoubtedly make easy prey, they repeatedly choose to pass us by.
I can't help but wonder how many hundreds or even thousands of times sharks have seen me while I'm surfing or diving and just swam on by, and I didn't even know they were there. They're always looking at us, but they're not attacking, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
Knowledge is our best weapon against shark attack. Understanding when we may be vulnerable, our best defense. In many cases, shark attacks could have been avoided, yet there are always a few extremely rare instances where sharks have struck without apparent cause. As long as we continue to enter the shark's domain, attacks are inevitable. And as long as there are attacks, the investigation will continue.